This video will walk you through how to edit a Motion Array Premiere Pro template that's a little bit more complex because it includes adding photographs. So we're using this one as an example, and you'll see there are photos here and there's also text. And there's animation that's inside of the Motion Array template. So I went ahead and downloaded that, and this is what it looks like. So when you play on the timeline, it's kind of hard to see what you're doing because there's no media here. Very often, if you're in Motion Array, it looks like there's all these cool photos and videos that come with the template, but sometimes it doesn't, so you have to add your own. So I've gone ahead and downloaded a bunch of pictures that we're going to use just as an example. And I'm going to start at the very beginning here on my timeline. I'm going over to the edit section, and I'm going to edit the placeholders first. So I'm going to edit the first photo, which is this one right here. And I'm just going to go ahead and drag, let's say this one, onto V1, onto my first video channel here. Because this photo is much larger than the sequence, if you look at the sequence settings, you'll see this is 1920 by 1080, but this photo is much bigger. I'm going to go ahead and right click on my clip, scroll down to scale to frame size. And now you'll see these little black bars on the side. So you want to double click and zoom in a bit and make sure to keep your rule of thirds in mind. In this instance, I'm zooming in, so there should be less headroom. So this one's just fine. You also want to make sure, especially if it's a photo, that you just extend it as long as you want, really, but it just can't be too short. If it's only a few seconds short, it'll mess up the preview. So just go ahead and extend it. It's a photo, it's not that heavy, it's not going to cause that big of a problem. Just play it safe and always make it longer than you think you need it to be. Then go back to the preview section in your timeline, and we're going to find this little video here. Here it is. So this is the first clip, and then it'll go to the next one. So let's go through and just add a few. So I'm going to the next one here. I'm going to add the next photo just into V1. Of course, you'll always want to include all of your media, not only in your box folder, but also in the folder that you're editing out of on your desktop or on your computer, wherever you save everything. So make sure that it's not just going from your downloads, because if you ever need to come back and edit it again, then it'll just be more difficult to find, especially if I ask you to change something. So I'm just going to add a few here so that you can see what it looks like. And these are kind of random photos. So obviously, if you were to use this template, you would want specific photos. And there would be a reason for using the template. Like any other kind of media, you always want it to have some kind of strategy around it. But for this instance, I'm just using these just as examples. So if this happens over here, if it pops up on your source, don't worry about it. You can always close that panel here, or you can always just like click these little arrows and go back over to your effect control. Just make sure that what you want to see is selected, and then it'll pop up here. So I'm also going to go back to my project bin. So that's how you navigate around there. So this is what we've done so far. We've created, let's hit play. We've created a couple of these photos. And if you notice that your Premiere Pro is going slowly, like mine is going slowly now, specifically because I'm screen recording, I'm gonna change my full, just bring it down to a quarter. It just makes it easier for Adobe Premiere Pro to edit while we're working on this. So let's say that this is what I wanted. Maybe I'll go ahead and add like one more placeholder. I'll add like this one. If this is a photo montage inside of your package, for example, it might be longer, it might be quite long. And so what might happen after you've opened a lot of these is you'll notice you have tons of tabs up here. You can always just close these if it gets unruly or it makes it hard for you to kind of see what you're working on. But you want to keep the preview over here. And that's like the main timeline. So let's say this is what we want. Let's go ahead and edit the text. We hit drop down text 1 and double click on this, and you could change it to, whatever, COVID in schools. Like most text in motion graphics, it should be uppercase. Not always, but most of the time it does look better that way. And this is also a sans serif font, which I appreciate. It doesn't have any funky little things all over the place that make it look dated. So I like this font for this look. It looks really good. Then I'll go into the next text and I'll just, whatever, warning. This is just like random to show you guys how to use it. And you could, in theory, go through and edit these, make them bigger, or go through your effects control, and then you can go back to your preview window to see, what it is that you did. So COVID in schools, warning, for example. Let's say that that's what you were doing. And then you go through and edit your next text. And every time you edit the text, you'll always want to go back to your preview just to make sure, that your text actually looks good, because especially if you have different characters, like if it's longer or shorter, it might not look as good. So you always want to go back and double check. Let's just say, remote learning or whatever, for example, and then go back to the preview. You see how this R is cut off here? If I zoom in, you'll be able to see it even better. This is something you want to keep an eye out for. So you want to go through and edit your template so that it doesn't cut off the R, or you could make the font smaller. Either way, you just want to be careful about anything like this, because that's not going to work. So you could go over to your effects control panel and you can make all of those adjustments there. Like you can adjust the font size, for example, and then you could go through and change pretty much everything you want to change all over here. So that's the simplest way, is just to reduce the font size. So remote learning. So then you basically go through and do the exact same thing every time. And if you wanted a very long photo montage, however long the montage is, you would take your timing bar and let's say this is the end. You would hit O for out, and then you'd see, I have a 1 minute and 10 second long photo montage, which is super long. But for this example, I'll just go ahead and export the little pieces that I did here. And then let's say we're done like around here. We'll just do out, file, export media. And then it's the same deal. This one actually does give you some other things that you might want to change, like color, for example. Sometimes they'll allow you to change, the text you can change inside of the effects control, but sometimes it's like the background colors might allow you some, customizable stuff. And so in this instance, you could double click on this and it allows you to do some kind of like a gradient thing. So if you zoom out, then you see there's like a gradient, and maybe you want a different color like on the inside. But you want to make sure that it looks good, because sometimes these gradients like don't look good. I actually think just the way that it looked better. But you do have the option to customize a lot of these things, especially if that helps you match what you were doing to different parts of your package. Like let's say this is just a piece of the B-roll inside of your package, for example, and you needed it to tie together with some coherent or cohesive color. So like you could make it blue or whatever. So anyways, that's it. Just export your media. Make sure that it is MP4, and in this instance it is 1920 by 1080. It's 30 frames per second. So I'm just going to go down and change that to 29.97. Change my name here. So let's call this COVID in the schools. And in this instance, it could be a B-roll for a package. So you could just call that B-roll or whatever you wanted to call it. If you were submitting this to AIR, and if this was VO, for example, you'd want to call it VO. Or if this was a stinger, you would want to call it stinger. So that's really important that your naming conventions are accurate. Then I would just hit save and ensure that this is the right time, and then hit export. And that's about it.